Hello and welcome to the Bucknuts Happy Hour. I am Patrick Murphy with Bucknuts and 247 Sports, and this officially begins year 2 of the Bucknuts Happy Hour. We started this podcast at the start of last season, right as fall camp kicked off, and we are now, I'm happy to say, at the beginning of 2023 fall camp. So we are back. We're doing it for a second year. We made it through the offseason. Buckeye fans made it through the offseason. And we've got a good show planned for you. I am back to having a beer for this, drinking a garage beer. This did not fit in any of the glasses that I had, so I'm going straight out of a can. My birthday was in July, and a buddy of mine, Matt, who doesn't listen to this show because he's not a good friend, but he did bring me a bunch of these beers, so thanks to Matt, who's not listening. Anyway, let's get to Buckeye talk. As I mentioned, fall camp started this week. We're going to talk about that. We were out at practice for the first day on Thursday. We also had interviews on Wednesday and Thursday, so plenty to talk about there. We're also going to dive in, if you missed it, on Friday. There have been reports that the Big Ten is going to expand once again, rating the Pac-12 even further. We'll dive into that. Oregon and Washington are the teams reportedly offered a spot in the conference. We're going to be joined here by a couple guys, but we're going to kick off with Dave Biddle, my coworker at Bucknuts. Dave, what's going on?
It's good to see you, Patrick. Now, have you had? I see you got a big tall boy there. Have you brought a 40 ounce onto the happy hour yet?
No.
Or is that come in the future?
What I think for that is like bowl trip. We decide to do one with you, me, and Steve, and we just go crazy. Maybe if the Buckeyes make the national championship game, that's when we bust out the 40s. What do you think about that?
Let's do that. So, like, not just winning, not winning the Big Ten, but after they win the semifinals and we're there covering the national championship game the night before, let's break out the 40s.
Yeah, I like that. That should be fun. Though, depending on where it is, I have found in certain cities, because I am a favorite. 40s are a favorite of mine. I've found certain places it's hard to find 40s. We are going to be joined by Tim Hall from 97.1 The Fan as well to talk with us, but he is finishing up some things at work, so he's going to pop in when he's done there. Dave and I will hold things down in the meantime. Dave, I want to ask you, and I'll ask Tim when he gets on here. Tim was not out at practice, but he's obviously dialed in on everything going on with the Buckeyes. Let's start with what was the thing that stood out most to you from what we saw at practice on Thursday when we were there. What popped the most to you out of everything you saw?
I would say Sonny Styles starting at the slot, and I don't think he's going to be your traditional slot by any means. I think it's a lot different than maybe the role that, for example, even last year that Tanner McAllister played. I think Sonny's going to be more of a rover back. He's going to blitz. He's going to be able to stop the run, and yes, he can cover. So I think they're going to move some parts around. I don't think it's going to be just, Sonny's the slot safety and that's it. I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. And I just love the fact, I've said all offseason, Patrick, I said I don't care exactly how or where, but I want Sonny Styles starting and playing a lot. And it sounds like he will be doing that. I would say the second thing there is right tackle. I've been spending a lot of time thinking about right tackle, what's going to happen there. Maybe some of us were guilty. Maybe some of us were right. But maybe some of us were guilty of saying Josh Simmons was going to step right in and be the right tackle. Not on the first day of camp. That wouldn't have happened if he was Orlando Pace coming in here for his first. It would have made him earn it. Maybe not Orlando Pace. But they weren't going to just put him with the first team his first day of camp. He wasn't even here in spring. But I think it's a lot closer than maybe a lot of people thought. Zen Michalski, Tegra Shabola. Zen was taking the first team reps. Tegra was taking the second team reps. And then Josh, really Jimmy, he goes by Jimmy Simmons. Jimmy was taking the third team reps. And Jimmy, Pat, was not as big as I thought he was. Like, he's listed now. He was listed at 6'6", now he's listed at 6'5". I mean, Zen and Tegra are clearly bigger than him. That's a closer battle, I think, than most people thought. The other spots on the offensive line, we know the two new spots. Josh Fryer is going to be the left tackle. Carson Hinsman is going to be the center. Who's going to be the right tackle? That's going to be a really good battle, I think.
So a couple things you said there, and Sonny was definitely the talk, I think, coming out of that practice, right? The fact that it does look like, and to me, it was weird because they had guys on two separate fields. They were running like simultaneous practices at time, right? Which I think was mostly done to play both quarterback, let both Devin Brown and Kyle McCord get plenty of reps with first team guys around them, not fully first team, but first team guys around them. So Sonny was with the group with Lathan Ransom, who was the starter, who was at the bandit position last year, and Jihad Carter, who was at the adjuster in this, which is not what we initially thought he would be. To me, those three guys can probably play all three safety positions. So I think you get like a really versatile group there that you could do a lot of different things. I don't know if that's the group you run out with every single game, but I think you can do a lot of stuff with that group. And then, like you mentioned, Sonny Styles isn't a traditional nickel, but he can cover speedy guys. He can also cover Marvin Harrison, as well as anyone can cover Marvin Harrison Jr. The right tackle spot, I'm interested to see how that continues to play out. Part of me wonders if maybe that was just it's day one, because Josh Simmons didn't do any rotating in with the first team that I saw. I feel like you've got to at least give him a shot there somewhat, right? So I will be interested to see how both of those play off. Let's bring Tim in because he's eagerly waiting to join the conversation. Hello, Timmy. How are you?
Oh, hello, boys. Patrick, Bids. Nothing going on today, huh? College football isn't completely freaking nuts and off the games again.
Super, super dull. That's why I'm just drinking a beer here at 3:08 on a Friday, getting it started early.
Good idea, Pat. I'll be joining you soon. I'm there with you in spirit right now.
I know. Always, always. Tim, I know you heard some of what we were just talking about, and I know you didn't get to go out to practice the other day, but so I'll frame this question a little differently for you. As fall camp started, what was the thing that you were most interested in learning? Maybe not day one, but as this plays out, what are you most interested in finding out about the Buckeyes here over the next 3-4 weeks?
Well, I'm trying to get a feel on when this quarterback timeline is going to sink in. I'm trying not to get too caught up in, the race in particular, but I think the timeline of it is interesting as to when that starter is going to be named. And, we've got some Devin Brown folks around town that, don't believe that this is a done deal, that this is a true and honest quarterback battle. So that aspect of it provides a little bit of intrigue until you get that starter. That starter named, you kind of never know. And until the language at least changes with how Ryan Day speaks about that battle, that you can't really go all the way out there either. And kind of what you guys were just talking about, I believe that both these guys can play the position really well. Like if either one had to go out there and handle their business, I believe they could do it. But when you're trying to replace everything that they're trying to replace on offensive line, we've been talking about it all offseason. I just heard Bids going through player after player after player, who's going to step up and who's going to look good. I mean, I feel like we got to point the finger at Josh Fryer for one. And if there was one guy that you were just going to demand a different kind of excellence from without really having played a lot of football, one of the biggest positions out of the entire 22 starting positions, let's be honest. Like you're looking at your starting left tackle. These days, go look at what these guys are making in the NFL. Ask running backs how they feel compared to what left tackles' wallets and checkbooks look like. That is a really, really important position. So whichever one of these guys Josh Fryer is going to be protecting, I don't know. I don't even know if you could wait that long, if the play wasn't completely there, before you would actually have these ongoing discussions about, all right, who would we go to next? Who would we shift over there to try there next? So I think that's crucial. I think that probably is the more important discussion than Kyle McCord and Devin Brown.
I don't want to bury the lead. Timmy Hall has great hair, as we all know. He's tried different hairstyles over the years. Patrick, I don't say this lightly. I think he might have nailed it. This might be the Timmy Hall, the A+ Timmy Hall. I think you nailed it, my friend. This is it.
Bids.
You finally nailed it.
Coming from you, who has, that.
Who used to also have good hair, right?
Oh, man. I mean, I know I got to look at Harrison Ford now that the new Indiana Jones was out, and he's kind of growing himself out a little bit. But you rewind.
Yeah.
If you rewind to like Last Crusade Harrison Ford, where he's got the touch of gray starting to spawn off, that's sort of the look that you have locked into. And now with this lovely beard, I can't even get on your level. I've got sort of like an Orlando Bloom Pirates of the Caribbean type of facial hair thing going, but it's all I can do. It's the best I got.
No, it's perfect. You got it. If it's always been A, maybe B plus at times. A plus. This is it. You nailed it. Bam. All right, Patrick. Let's talk some
Very
football.
kind. You're making me feel pretty good on a Friday, kids.
Patrick's like, can we not talk about hair?
Well, I was just going to ask, do we need to get you guys a room? Like, is that what we're headed towards here?
We're both happily married, just like you are, Patrick.
I don't know if I'd go that far.
I mean, we do live pretty close. We can make that happen.
Hope Sarah's not listening. You won't be happily married any longer, Patrick.
What do you say? I'll meet you at Handles, Bids. I'll take a lemon bar, okay?
There you go. I love Handles.
Let's dive into the quarterback situation because obviously, we've talked about it a lot throughout the offseason, but it's the biggest topic that we have here with no returning starter. Dave, what did you make? And again, for people who missed it, quarterbacks were on different fields a lot of the time, working with different offensive groups. Each one had a starting receiver. Emeka Egbuka was on one field. Marvin Harrison Jr. was on another. So they broke it up pretty nicely for them. But Dave, what was your impression of Kyle McCord? Let's do Kyle McCord and Devin Brown first. We can talk about the other guys if we want. But what was your impression day one of fall camp based on what you saw in the spring?
It felt like a lot like spring, where in times in spring they actually did have bullets flying at them where they had to worry about not really getting hit, but it was a little bit more obviously when they're in full pads and everybody else is going live except the quarterbacks. They're still going to get like bumped, ran into, and stuff like that. So they didn't have to deal with that. So it's hard to really gauge too much. I thought both guys made some good throws. Both guys, made some questionable throws. And even sometimes like when Kyle McCord, I know at one point, Patrick, you were focused on the Devin Brown side. I was focused on the Kyle McCord side so we can compare notes. There was one swing pass that if it was a real football game would have gone down as like a good play for Kyle McCord. He swung it out there and Travion Henderson caught it, made a guy miss, and would have had a big gainer. The thing was, it was a really high swing pass, and Travion Henderson, not a tall guy, went up and got it and then made a guy miss. And it was all Travion Henderson. But I was thinking, you can't do that. Like that was an easy pass, quote unquote easy. And but I thought overall, both guys, come into camp, they're looking good. I like how they handled themselves at the press conference the other day. I do believe Ryan Day when he says it is a close battle. A lot of times when coaches say that about quarterback competitions, it can be BS. I do believe it's a close battle. But again, Patrick, I do think Kyle McCord will be trotting out there with the starters when the Buckeyes take the field at Bloomington, Indiana for the season opener. I do think Kyle McCord's going to have a very good year as a starter.
To me, the things that I noticed, I thought Devin Brown looked a bit more confident, for lack of a better word, than maybe he did in spring. Now, that doesn't mean that every throw was perfect. It certainly wasn't. He threw the only interception of the day, rolling out to his left. Just a throw that he probably shouldn't have made. And I think it was Malik Hartford who read it and picked it off. But and probably would have gone for 6 if it were a real game. Good for Malik Hartford for recognizing that one. Kyle McCord, again, wasn't perfect, but I feel like that experience, he's done this enough times now that he kind of knows how it's all going to go. He just seems a bit more confident on some of those more difficult throws. Nothing was really too difficult, and I think it was by design, especially with us there, with the fans there. But I did think that both guys had their moments. You do see with Devin Brown that escapability, and he was pressured quite a bit. And I want to get to the defensive line in a minute, but his ability to just kind of roll out and get out of trouble is something that certainly will play a factor. Not that Kyle McCord can't do that, and he's made that apparent when we've talked to him that he feels like he's a mobile guy, but it's just not as natural as when Devin Brown's doing it. So, look, you've got a little bit of different guys there, and this is kind of what we've known all along, and the Buckeyes are going to have to pick what goes best for what they want to run. Tim, if you are picking between these two styles of quarterbacks, what in your mind works best for Ohio State? Because we've seen it. We saw Justin Fields a few years ago, and we've seen the C.J. Stroud, a guy who doesn't like to run as much. How do you feel? If you're Ryan Day and all other things are equal, what do you think about dual threat versus not?
I mean, I got to say, I think this goes for almost anything. It's how you got to be at your job in 2023. You don't have versatility if you can't, keep your wife happy and be a good dad at the same time, like, and be a great brother, son. Like, you got to be everything to everybody in this life right now. So the more versatility you have in whatever it is, I think it's better. So you look at some of the superstar quarterbacks in the sport right now, go to the next level, look at the NFL. These guys that can do both seem to be killing it the best. And don't even forget about guys like Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, who you just think are the better passers. They are, right? But they're also really mobile guys. And when they need to scramble and when they need to be elusive, they are. Aaron Rodgers has always been a guy like that. He's going to be getting less and less so as he gets older. But yeah, I mean, and I don't want to, until I see Kyle McCord face live bullets for at least a good 5-6 game chunk. I would love to give him a half a season at least before I locked in what my overall opinion was on this man and how he plays the position, and if he doesn't have enough of that ability. But from everything that we've analyzed so far, yes, Devin Brown, he even said so himself, right, and to the media a couple days ago. I'm a little bit more athletic. I can move better. I would certainly want that. Like, if I'm picking between two sides, I'd want to be able to do both. I'd want to have that versatility in my game, because that's the way that I see the position being played going into the future.
Yeah, I think that certainly makes sense. Look, I think ideally you'd prefer to have a guy who can do both really well. Caleb Williams won the Heisman last year for a reason, right, at USC. I do wonder if, when it gets live, if Kyle McCord is running a little bit more, at least more than CJ did a year ago, just because he's kind of seen what that can do and what not having that can do. We'll learn more as we go on with that, obviously. I want to move over to the defensive side of the ball because obviously there's a lot of questions there. The defensive line, for me, it passes the look test. Dave, what we saw from them, and especially JT Tuimoloau, who I thought really kind of wrecked a lot of what they wanted to do with the offensive line, the quarterback, and it didn't matter who was blocking him. And I think if he can play at that level throughout this season, he could have a really good year. What do you make of the guys up front first, and we'll just kind of move back through this defense from what you saw on Thursday?
Yeah, also very bullish on this group, just like yourself. I think Tuimoloau is the guy that I think, if I had to pick who's going to have like a superstar year, it could be JT. Also, though, I'm very high on Mike Hall and Tyleik Williams. Just go back and watch the Notre Dame game, which is really the only time Mike Hall was completely healthy last season. He completely wrecked that game. I mean, he was just a force throughout that Notre Dame game, particularly in the second half. And, then was nursing that shoulder injury all year. And Mike Hall can be a star. Tyleik Williams can be a star. Jack Sawyer could be. But JT's the one that I think could really break out and be like an early round NFL draft pick, as many are predicting that he could be, a first round pick. I think he will be a first round pick in the 2024 draft. And then you look at the depth at DN. I'll get to D tackle in a moment as far as the backups. But when you've got Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry as your backup defensive ends entering their second year, something if they were a true freshman, I love both those guys. And Kenyatta Jackson looks like he's straight out of central casting for a defensive end. Long, athletic, gets off quickly, and the one thing he needed to do was put on weight and get stronger, and he has. He was 6'5", 235 last year at this time. He's still 6'5". He's now about 260 pounds and still looks just as quick. I like Caden Curry a lot too. Then a D tackle behind Hall and Tyleik Williams. Obviously, Ty Hamilton's going to play a lot. In fact, Ty Hamilton could start. You never know. I think that the top three D tackles, there's no doubt in whatever order: Mike Hall, Tyleik Williams, Ty Hamilton. And that's going to be a good battle between Pat's friend, Hero Kanu. I cannot believe I didn't get a picture when Hero Kanu, you guys were just chatting about soccer after practice yesterday, and Hero Kanu at one point just puts his arm around Pat, and they're just chatting like they're best friends. I should have got a picture of that because I would have titled it Twins. It was awesome. They're just chilling, talking about soccer. Hero's from Germany. He looks great as a redshirt freshman. He told me at Peach Bowl Media Days, guys, the one thing he wanted to do was, get stronger, obviously, and get better at everything. But he wanted to lose some body fat, and it looks like he's done that. He looked great. And but I thought Tywone Malone looked good too. So there's your battle for the final spot on the two deep. Tywone Malone, the transfer. and Hero Kanu. So I love – if we could say this about – we're going to talk about, I know, other levels of the defense, as Patrick said. You can say this about any level of the defense. They are dripping with depth on every level of this defense. So there you go. I think this defensive line will be perhaps the strength of the defense. I like the secondary a lot too. I like the linebackers. I'm bullish all over on this defense, but there you go. There are my extended thoughts on the D-line.
Yeah, Hero. I'm interested to see what Hero does this year because I ran into him at a crew game. That's what we were talking about the other day. But I've talked to him a few times this offseason at various things, and he's talked about how everything's kind of slowed down for him now in year 2 and whatnot. But as you mentioned, there's a lot of talent there in front of him. I think if JT Tuimoloau, as I said, if he can play, he doesn't need to be Penn State every week. But if he can just play up to the level he's capable of every week at a consistent level, and I wrote about this a few weeks ago, he can be right there with those defensive ends that we've seen in the past that the Buckeye fans have kind of waited for Ohio State to have. I have no doubt about that. Tim, if the defensive line can get back to what it was when it had a Chase Young and the Bosa brothers, and I don't want to just signal them out because obviously Sam Hubbard, Devon Hamilton, Tylee
Williams,
Tyquan Lewis, guys. If they can get back to that level of play, how much does that take the pressure off the rest of the defense when the quarterback doesn't have time to throw the ball? The running back isn't getting to that second level. It just changes things, right?
Oh, I mean, you said it. I mean, that extra half second, honestly, is everything in the game of football. If you are generating pressure, I think like Dave was hitting on too, when you get those phenomenal players that can disrupt the interior of an offensive line and you can create that force up the middle, that really does something. I mean, I can't imagine as a quarterback when you snap the ball, whether you're playing under center or from the shotgun, and you've got that rush coming from both of the A gaps and it's right in your face in a split second, that forces you to go haywire immediately. And then if you've got an end like a Jack Sawyer or a Jalen Tuimoloau on either side of you, chasing you back one way or the other, and then boom, you're going right into a guy like Tylee Williams or a guy like Mike Hall Jr. or a Hero Kanu later on, if he develops a little bit more, Ty Hamilton, there's so much that it does. And obviously you're going to look for any kind of help that you can get when we've been waiting to see this secondary step up and perform in the big games and just be able to do their jobs a little bit better when called upon. And the more disruption you get up front from those guys, the better. And let's be honest too, I know much of this is stemming from what's going on the recruiting trail, but one feeds the other. And, as far as coaches go, we'd probably look at, Brian Hartline as being the big storyline, moving into his role as offensive coordinator. But now with Larry Johnson taking some heat from the fan base for missing out on some big time recruits, you go out and show what your defensive linemen can do on the field in a real college football season. And this leads to success. I mean, honestly, it hadn't been too long since he's pulled in some big time recruits, and a lot of them will be playing for the Buckeyes here this year. And so it'd be great to watch them go out and do that and be maybe the force of the defense.
Yeah, I think we can move along to other parts of the defense. But again, I think it all starts up there. If I asked Cody Simon about it, he's obviously a linebacker right behind those guys. Just makes everyone's job easier if they can cut down on the time. Cornerbacks have to cover. Anybody's in coverage. Get to the running back in the backfield. Those type of things. Dave, I think most people know what the Buckeyes have in linebackers. It's pretty good. We could talk about C.J. Hicks, and it sounds like, based on what Jim Knowles said, that his path to playing time may be in that jack role. But we already touched on some of the safeties. The cornerbacks, to me, interesting. I think there are, and tell me if you think I'm wrong here, I think there are really 3 guys contending for the starting spots in Denzel Burke, who was kind of on one field, and then Davison Igbinosun and Jordan Hancock, who were the 2 on another field when they did 7-on-7s. Is that kind of your read after what you saw on Thursday?
Basically, although to get more specific, I would say Denzel Burke's got a starting job locked down, and then it's between Hancock and Igbinosun for the other starting spot. And all 3 of those guys are going to play a lot. I don't know what the rotation will look like, but I'll be shocked if all 3 of those guys don't play a lot. And if it does work out the way we saw it the other day, like where at first, as you mentioned, they were rotating and they were on different fields at times. But when they were together, it looked like usually Burke would go first, Hancock would go second, Igbinosun third as far as the depth chart. Just running through very light drills on the first day of camp. But we're going to read too much into things. But seriously, after doing this for many years, that usually means that is the pecking order going into camp. Now, that also could mean that is subject to change very quickly, as we are just like talking about right tackle. You're not going to have necessarily what's going to be even what you think entering camp is your depth chart. You're going to make certain guys earn it. But yeah, I think right now Denzel Burke's the number one corner. I think Hancock's the number two with Igbinosun knocking on that door. That young man was a freshman All-American at Ole Miss last year. I love his game. Hancock, though, was a big time player in high school, and I thought he was ready for a breakout year last year. He suffered the injury in camp, ended up missing half the season. Guys, they're in such good they're in such a good spot at corner. Last year, only 6 scholarship corners, and then the worst happened. You were thinking going into the season, well, only 6 scholarship corners. As long as they stay healthy, they'll be okay, because at least it's high-level talent. Then what happened? They got decimated by injuries. They had a game where Jair Brown, true freshman, and J.K. Johnson, redshirt freshman, who's no longer even here, started a game. And now they have 8 scholarship corners. They're a year older. And they bring in Lorenzo Styles. They do have a couple of true freshmen who look really good in Calvin Simpson-Hunt and Jermaine Matthews. And then all these other guys. I mean, it's just – I love what they got going on at corner. And if it does work out, Patrick and Timmy, that Igbinosun is the number 3 corner, you're loaded at corner. If Davis and Igbinosun, I think he's got big-time game. If he's your number 3 corner, you're loaded at corner. And I think they're loaded at corner, boys.
Tim, I know you gotta bounce here in a minute, but – we've been very optimistic, and I think that's what this time of year is, right? Everybody is excited, and everybody looks good, especially on the first day of practice. What is your concern? Where is one area, as we stand right now, where you're just like, this may not be it. This could be the reason that the Buckeyes don't get to where they want to go this year. What is the one negative that you can provide to this podcast thus far?
Despite everything that Dave said, I want to believe that. I do. The corners, they feel like they're going to be much, much better than they were last year, but I don't know how it's all going to click in when you get into these bigger games. When you go to face Notre Dame on the road and you got Sam Hartman slinging it around, who's a step up at the quarterback position for them. When it's Penn State time, and how good is this Alar going to be for them throwing the football? And then, of course, November 25th on the road. I feel good about Ohio State against every other opponent, other than when you get to those big games. And then how is that defense going to perform when you actually need them to perform? Is there that performance where they could hold somebody to 14 points, 17 points? I don't even care what the score is. But it's just situational football. It's like, what are you letting up? Are you letting up that big play? Are you letting up, consecutive, 50-yard plays on back-to-back drives? Things like that. So it's still a concern. And then the other one that we already talked about would be how the offensive line comes together, because you've got so much talent at running back and at wide receiver. I believe that Kyle McCord is going to be really, really good when he wins this job. So it ain't about that. It's just how those guys are protected. And then it's that back end of the defense, because I do think the D-line and even the linebackers that they are going to boast are going to be pretty good. But how does it all come together? And do these guys believe in themselves the way that they're going to need to?
Sure. And, the thing is, we can talk about how good it looks and how good it looks early in the season. We're not going to find out until you mention that Notre Dame game. That'll be the first real test.
Yeah.
I'm sure that they'll get tested a little bit against Indiana, but after that, you got 2 weeks of what you should pretty much roll. All right, Tim. Well, thanks for jumping on. I do appreciate it. It's been a little bit since we've had you on here, so I wanted to get your insight. What'd you say?
Sorry, no. What did you say?
I just wanted to get your insight, and you brought it. So
yes,
I always appreciate that.
Pat, always a pleasure, and we'll talk to you later tonight, buddy.
That sounds good. All right, we'll see you
on the Buckeye Show.
Yep.
See you.
I'll be coming to you live from the parking lot outside lower.com field.
So. Of course you will.
Yep. All right. I'll see you, Timmy. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks again for Tim for coming on here. And, Tim's been a frequent guest. We love having Timmy on, and I think he provides good insight to everything Buckeyes. He does the Buckeye Show, after all. A couple other things I wanted to touch on real quick before we jump off of kind of the start of fall camp, and Dave will be back in just a second. The first thing being, you're going to hear this guy's name a lot throughout fall camp. Carnell Tate, the wide receiver. He looked good in spring. He looked even better, I thought, in the practice we saw. I don't know what Carnell Tate's going to do this year as a freshman. That receiving room is loaded. I don't know where he fits in the pecking order right now, but rest assured, he looks like another future star. I thought Brandon Inniss looked pretty good. Dave, just those two freshman wide receivers real quick, what did you make of them? And do they have a role this year? Do you see them getting on the field when it matters at all?
I got to stick with my guns here. I mean, it'd be easy to say yes. Here's what I keep saying, but I think it's pertinent. That's why I keep saying it. That's why I keep repeating myself. Could Carnell Tate and Brandon Inniss, if they needed to play as true freshmen, have big roles, could they handle it and play well? Yes, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Will they get that chance? No. And hopefully not. Stay with me. Because I think the only reason that they would is injuries to a Marvin Harrison Jr. or Emeka Egbuka. I don't want to see injuries to what could go down as the best tandem of wide receivers that come through Ohio State. I do not say that lightly. We've had a ton of great wide receiver tandems come through here. And just look at Marvin 2 years ago, Patrick. Look at Marvin's freshman year.
Yeah.
He absolutely was ready. We could see it in the spring. He enrolled early. We could see it. It's like, wow. I remember saying, he reminds me of A.J. Green, A.J. Green at Georgia and early in his Bengals career. And not just because he's wearing the number 18. Didn't remind me of his dad. It reminded me of A.J. Green. And then, dare I say, now he reminds me of a better A.J. Green, but I digress. And so we knew he was ready. And then he didn't play really at all in the regular season, and he had 3 touchdowns and just broke out in the Rose Bowl. And the only reason he played, as everybody knows, in the Rose Bowl is because Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson sat out to get ready for the draft, rightfully so. Look what they're doing. So if my point is, if Marvin Harrison Jr. can't see the field as a true freshman, am I going to say that, am I going to predict that Carnell Tate and Brandon Inniss are going to see the field a lot as a true freshman? No, I can't do that. But it won't shock me if they do. Now, who knows? Maybe they could beat out a guy like Julian Fleming or Jaden Ballard. Xavier Johnson, to me, is going to have a role in this offense. You're going to need to beat out a Fleming or a Ballard or both if you're Tate or you're Inniss. But in the future, Carnell Tate's going to be a hell of a wide receiver on the outside, and Inniss is going to be a hell of a wide receiver at the slot. Those guys are going to be dangerous. And I like Noah Rogers a lot, too. And don't forget about Bryson Rogers. That's a really, really, that's just a fantastic freshman class. But to answer your question, man, I'll just go with the Marvin Harrison Jr. rule. If he can't play a lot as a true freshman, I'll have to believe it when I see it with Carnell Tate and Brandon Inniss.
The final thing I want to ask before we talk about this conference realignment stuff, between Ryan Day and Jim Knowles, we talked to both of them, kind of the offensive guru, though Ryan Day does more defensive stuff now, and the defensive guy. What was maybe one or two, if you don't think of just one thing that from either of them that really stood out to you the first time we've talked to them in some time, other than Ryan Day at Media Days? But what stood out to you?
Well, Knowles was talking about just his safeties for sure. Sonny Styles, as I mentioned, we've talked about that. Sonny playing the slot. I think it will be more of a rover back. He's going to do a little bit of everything. He's not going to just do what Tanner McAllister did last year, do what Cam Martinez would do if he was in the slot. So that jumped out at me. But then also that Jahad Carter is going to be the adjuster. That certainly jumped out at me. No surprise that Lathan Ransom is going to be the bandit. Knowles loves Ransom. I know Ransom, he had a tough game against Georgia, but overall I thought he played well last year, and I really like that young man. He's tough as nails. He's smart. He just you can see why the coaches love him. So basically hearing him name his starting safeties on the first day of camp, it's like for media guys and fans, it's like, this is perfect. Ryan Day, I love Ryan Day, as you know. Ryan Day in 2019, we were going into camp, and it was like Justin Fields versus Chugs and Gunnar Hoke. And we'd ask Ryan Day, who's your starting quarterback? We all knew. And he would say with a straight face, we don't know yet. It's a competition between Justin Fields, Chugs, and Gunnar Hoke. So I love Jim Knowles. I love how candid he is. So that definitely jumped out at me. I'll also say I will harken back to Big Ten Media Days, and I asked him to follow up when we asked when we got to meet with Ryan Day the other day, like, tell me more about this less rotating on the defensive line, because we've been talking about that a lot on Bucknuts and the
That's
Bucknuts
exactly what I was hoping you would
and
say.
Bucknuts Happy Hour. It's like, listen, I don't need like guys that are going to be undrafted free agents out there against Georgia when the game's on the line. I need my dudes out there, okay? I still have no idea how Teron Vincent led the D tackles in snaps last year. He had guys out there, undrafted free agents out there, taking away plays from guys that should have been out there. This year, with JT, with Sawyer, with Kenyatta Jackson and Curry at defensive end, you got to pick your top three. And then at D tackle, I think they've got their top three. You got to pick your top three with Ty Leak, Mike Hall, and Ty Hamilton. Roll with those guys. Now, maybe a Hero Canoe or a Tywone Malone can step up there, but I like the idea of playing your best guys when the game is on the line.
Yeah, I was hoping that's what you'd say, because I know that that's been a big topic. Look, I think they're still going to rotate, especially in some of the games when they get up comfortably. But like you said, when the game is on the line, the best guys need to be in there, and we've kind of discussed those already. The one thing that I thought, and this came from Media Day too, Ryan Day seems okay. Not that he'd want it to be this way, but at least he's open to the idea of going into the season without a starting quarterback, or at least playing both guys. Now, I think if he has it his way, they find a starting quarterback, they go through camp with that guy, and he's their starter. But he's been asked a couple times about that, and he hasn't just said, no, we'll have a starter. He's saying, the guys have to go out and win it, which I guess is just what you say if you're a coach. And maybe if you got him, to be completely honest, he would be candid that, look, they'll have a starter by week 1. But I was just a little bit surprised that he's kind of been open to that idea a little bit. I don't think that'll happen. As you and I both agree, we think it'll be Kyle McCord. But even if it is Devin Brown, I think one guy will emerge. But I don't know. I thought that was a little interesting. It perked my interest a little bit, and maybe not in a good way, because the old saying, if you have 2 starting quarterbacks, you don't have one. I think they will have one, though. All right, let's flip over to the announcement. Well, not the announcement, the reports today that the Big Ten is expected to approve Oregon and Washington as new members of the conference. Dave, I'm not at all surprised by this, given what we've seen in recent years, but I thought maybe this would come further down the road. Now, the Pac-12 has kind of been collapsing here, so maybe you just strike while the iron's hot. But what is your initial reaction to what sounds like the Big Ten will add 2 more teams from the West Coast?
Yeah, it seemed like it was fait accompli here. Like, there were all the leaks, and it was like, at first I was like, do you really need like a 2 more West Coast teams? It's not like you can just, if you're in LA, just, hey, it's an easy drive to Seattle. It's like, no, you're still going to have over a 2-hour plane ride from LA to Seattle. But everything that was leaking out, it just seemed like it was definitely going to happen, especially when it was, and this is no surprise, the Big Ten has all of the leverage. And again, as Patrick said, this is not official yet, but it pretty much is. Big Ten has all the leverage where Washington and Oregon just would crawl to Chicago and they just name your price. Well, we want, as long as you can give us more than the Big 12, we're in. And so the Big Ten held all the cards, and we don't know exactly what the lesser, amount that Oregon and Washington will get, but they will get a lesser cut of the TV deal. How much less, we don't know. It'll be similar to when Rutgers and Maryland joined the conference. And overall, Patrick, I think the more I think about it, I like it. I think, especially with the 12-team playoff, it's interesting. This is I almost said the old days, the current days of the 4-team playoff. You wouldn't want to keep adding like guys like teams like USC and like Oregon and Washington. It's like, come on, like, it's hard enough to get in. We're really going to like cannibalize ourselves. Now with 12 teams getting in, I like it. I like it. I'm looking forward to trips to Seattle and Eugene and LA. But focusing on Oregon and Washington, at first I was skeptical. I've certainly come around on it, and I think with the 12-team playoff, it makes a lot of sense.
What about the idea? Well, I mean, we were already, as the Big Ten, going to expand into the Pacific time zone, but it's, and not that the Big Ten is completely Midwest anymore at all, but I mean, from a fan's perspective, it's fun to have the chance to go to Oregon, go to USC every once in a while. But if you're doing trips like that every other year, do you think this hurts the fan experience at all, or do you think it just becomes more NFL-like where maybe fans don't travel as much? I mean, we know Ohio State fans are everywhere. They'll show up. But just from a Big Ten perspective, I mean, you're going to be from one coast to the other now, probably as far as you can go with Rutgers to USC and UCLA. What do you think about that from that side of things?
Not many programs can say this. Maybe Ohio State's one of maybe, I don't know, 5, if that. But, I mean, they have fans everywhere, the Buckeyes do, and, you know, especially there's a large alumni group in L.A. You got a lot of Buckeyes in the Pacific Northwest. They're just absolutely thrilled right now that that Oregon, Washington, and the L.A. schools are joining the Big Ten. It's like, you know, it's just crazy. I think it's going to be okay because, yeah, Buckeye fans do love doing, like, you know, so for example, Indiana. Every time I've been to Indiana, both back in the day as a, you know, college guy, as a fan, and my times there as a media guy. I mean, Indiana is Ohio Stadium West. A lot of people that live in Western Ohio, it's like a, you know, such an easy drive. It's an easy drive from Columbus too. So it is fun to go to some of those Big Ten road games. You're not far from Michigan. You're not far from Michigan State, even Penn State, Purdue, a few others. But like, how many Ohio State fans are like driving to Minnesota, for example, for you know, a game against Minnesota? You know, how many are doing that? You know, how many are going to Iowa? Actually, a decent amount go to Iowa. I'm okay with it because, yeah, you're not going to get people that live here in the Midwest like driving out to like Portland or whatever, or excuse me, Eugene. But, you know, the people in the Pacific Northwest, which is a vast Ohio State group, they'll hold the fort down. There will be people flying in and, you know, to further enhance it. So I'm okay with it. I hear what you're saying. I mean, it's not going to be the same as when we're all here in the Midwest, but that went out the door long ago when they added Maryland and Rutgers. That was the one that was just like, wow. And then it almost made as big of a wow as adding USC and UCLA were. I was like, after adding Rutgers and Maryland, that almost, even though, you know, that they're basically in the footprint. I mean, Jersey and Pennsylvania share a state border. So does Maryland with Pennsylvania. Penn State was already in the league, so that kind of made sense. Same footprint. When they went out to LA, it was like, wow. Still, for me, I don't know how you feel about it. It wasn't even as much of a wow as Maryland and Rutgers. So it's interesting, man. And now I think, just to put a cap on this, I think the next 2 schools that I think might join, if I had to go out on a limb here, North Carolina and Virginia. And everybody's talking about what, you know, Florida State, Clemson, Stanford. First of all, forget about Stanford and Cal. No way, in my opinion, especially Cal. Actually, both of them. North Carolina and Virginia. Keep an eye on that.
I was going to ask you if you thought there would be more, so that's you covered that already. Yeah, I think we have to have an open mind about this right now, right? I mean, as soon as they went, first of all, Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC, that was kind of mind-boggling at the time. Doesn't seem as much anymore. Then USC and UCLA obviously coming to the Big Ten. I'm still just kind of waiting to see how that all goes, but I think it'll be, I don't know, interesting to say the least. Look, Buckeye fans missed their opportunity to go to Eugene in 2020 because of the COVID season. Now you'll get the opportunity more often. I don't know how the schedule is going to work out. Let me ask you this last thing on this topic. When you're talking about kind of the professionalization, is that how you say that word? Professionalization of the sport. We've seen it with the transfer portal, with NIL. I mean, is it just time to go to a full, take what the NFL has done so well and just 2 conferences, break them up into divisions, do it like the NFL does, have a playoff at the end of it? I mean, would you be in favor of that, or do you feel like college football needs to stay college football?
Yeah, I mean, geez. I mean, is the genie already out of the bottle there as far as it staying college football? But no, I don't think I want to go that far. When you say just 2 conferences, have the AFC and the NFC. I don't want to go that far. I think there's room to have, obviously, the Big Ten and the SEC. They already are the 2 super conferences, and that's just going to get exacerbated now. But I think there is room to have other conferences. Now, I never will understand, if I'm like a MAC school, I'd rather compete for an FCS championship where you actually can win a championship. Although the more I think about it, if you're like a MAC school, if you win the MAC championship and just go to a bowl game, that is your national championship. So I digress. But like, seriously, like, I think you maybe could have some schools go to FCS that have absolutely no chance at ever even being in the playoff. But now with 12 teams in the playoff, You can have a Big 12 that might now add, in addition to what they already have in Arizona, Arizona State, Utah. That could be viable. Is it going to compete with the SEC and the Big 10? No, but you're going to get your champion in there. And, stranger things have happened. So, and we'll see what happens with the ACC. The Pac-12 is toast. But no, I don't want to just see two, like they do with the NFL. Are we going to stay with 135 Division I, FBS teams? That seems like too many to me, Patrick. But no, I don't think we're going to pare it down to just two conferences.
One more thing, because you mentioned Pac-12 being toast. I imagine that this is going to, well, it'll have to at some level affect the Rose Bowl pretty significantly, at least what we think of the Rose Bowl, which has already changed some. You, I know, grew up watching the Rose Bowl as I did, but you've watched a couple more of them. What do you make of that this won't be, assuming that the Pac-12 doesn't somehow pull this thing together, it won't be the traditional version of the Rose Bowl as we know it. They'll have to pivot somehow if they're going to stay in the game.
Yeah, I mean it's tough because it's awesome being there. Like seeing like the sunset on the mountains, the San Gabriel Mountains. It's one of the more beautiful settings in sports. You and I were sitting next to each other in the press box for the 2018 game, 2019 Rose Bowl, 2018 season, Ohio State against Washington. Dwayne Haskins, RIP. The Buckeyes get up boom, 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 21-0. Dwayne had his 50th touchdown pass. It's beautiful there, and you're right. I mean, just growing up, that was the goal really for many years before they had the college football playoff. Even before that, the BCS, and even before that, whatever it was called before that, what was it called? The college football, I can't remember now, unification. No, that's not what it was called. It was something stupid like that, though. The goal, if you're a Big Ten team, was to get to the Rose Bowl and win the Rose Bowl. Win the Big Ten and get to the Rose Bowl. That was it, and then win the Rose Bowl. Those days are past, and it's, if the 4-team playoff didn't kill it, I mean, it's definitely dead now. I mean, it's not dead. You're still going to have the Rose Bowl. You're going to have the Rose Bowl parade and everything, but it already lost luster, Patrick. To me now it's lost a lot more luster. It's still going to survive. It's going to be the Rose Bowl. They're still going to have it every year, but now, and it'll be incorporated into, I'm sure somehow they're going to incorporate it like they do now with the college football playoff. But the Rose Bowl itself, man, it pretty much was never the same after they went to the playoff, and now it has been diminished even more.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it earlier when you were talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. not playing as a freshman. You had two guys in Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson just sit out the Rose Bowl. That wouldn't have happened previously. So to your point, it has already changed quite a bit. It doesn't mean the same thing to the guys that are on the field, which is in some levels unfortunate, but times change and you kind of have to deal with it. All right, Dave, anything else that we didn't touch on from fall camp that you feel like we need to mention real quick?
I will say the overall health of the team.
Oh, yeah. Knock
on wood. It reminds me of when Joe Burrow had his press conference first day of Bengals camp, was talking about he's even knocking on wood doesn't work, fellas and ladies. Joe Burrow was like, knock on wood, it's the first time I've ever had a real camp. I'm going to be healthy throughout camp. And then next day, gets carted off. So, listen, we know guys are going to get banged up. Guys already have. We were out there. Tyleek Williams got banged up. Thankfully, it looked maybe it wasn't good at first, and then it was nothing. Maybe it just scared him a little bit. And he didn't have to get carted off. In fact, he just was standing up and was able to watch the rest of practice standing up right with the defensive lineman. So trainers weren't even working on him. So that's great news. So there's going to be guys that get banged up, as we all know. It's football. But the fact that they're entering camp in such good health just puts them ahead of the curve. You're going to get banged up. But I don't remember an Ohio State team entering camp this healthy. Especially in guys coming off serious injuries like Evan Pryor coming off the torn patellar tendon. Other guys that we thought would be back, but you still need to see it first, like Jacob James, many others. But Evan Pryor is a great example. They're just healthy across the board with their scholarship guys. Court Williams. And I'm here for it. It's just and the guys that came in that transferred. They had 8 scholarship guys that transferred, as you know, Patrick. 8 scholarship guys came in as transfers this year. They're all healthy. I should say, if you want to, I don't know if you count Nigel Glover as a transfer or just part of the 2023 class. That would be 9. He was even there wearing the number 37, running with the linebackers. Nigel Glover's there. He's healthy. So I would say the overall health of the team is certainly noticeable.
Yeah. The only one I would say is Mitchell Melton was out there, but he didn't do as much as some of the other guys. So they must still be easing him back in a little bit. But yeah, Evan Pryor, full go. You mentioned all those guys. I thought it was good to see. But yeah, I think we covered pretty much everything. I think we hit on it all. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate you doing this. I know you and Jay Book did the BM5 this morning, so we probably recycled some of that stuff. But
Football here, though, right? What's wrong with that? Hey,
it's the season.
Can't have enough Buckeye football, right, my friends? Everybody in the chat right now is probably like, we cannot get enough Buckeye football. That's why we love you guys. Patrick and I cannot get enough Buckeye football either. Love it.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
You and Steve enjoy running back interviews on Saturday. I will not be able to be there, but I'm sure you guys will hold down the fort, and I will see you next week.
Sounds good, my friend. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, Dave. All right. We're going to wrap this one up here. Thanks again to Dave and Tim for jumping on, talking Buckeyes, starting fall camp this week. As Dave just said, excited to be back and doing this for another season. It's always good this time of year. I have friends ask me all the time, like, "Oh, it's starting to be your busy season. The summer's over." Da da da. And I'm like, no. This is a good thing. Like, we want football back, even if it is my job. Like, I want Ohio State football back. I love college football. I love NFL football. So it is a job and there is a grind to it. But I always get excited when things are going and we have more to talk about, which I think is exciting for this show and whatnot. If you missed anything, if you're watching this live, you'll be able to catch this anywhere you get your podcasts. Please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. It helps us tremendously. And yeah, we'll be back to pretty much a weekly schedule here, I think, throughout fall camp and into the season. I tried to stay on that fairly regularly during the offseason, but there were some weeks where we just couldn't get it done. But like I said, football season's here. So thanks again for tuning in. And we'll talk to you guys next week, Buckeye fans. Cheers.